Guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali, and today I'd like to talk about developing a different perspective. So I'd gone to my person whom I generally connect with when I want to get a certain garment stitched for myself. And he owns this place wherein 10 or 15 people coming together, they work together and they bring out some amazing pieces. So on this particular day, I had reached a little early to only find one person working on something. Now, unlike us, this particular person cannot really hear things and therefore is not even able to speak. And I believe that he had locked the shop door from inside as he must have stepped in, because unfortunately for him, he cannot hear, so probably he would not be able to discern if somebody walked in while he was doing his work. And that's probably his own boundary to establish his own safety while he's so engrossed in work that he really will not be able to do anything if somebody walks in, because he is not able to unfortunately hear like most of us do. Since almost all of us are working on autopilot, working from the subconscious or the unconscious, I kind of failed to bring it into my awareness that this person could not really hear as I stood outside the door. And for a while I kept knocking at the door, wondering as to why this person is not opening the door, till it suddenly dawned on me that this person actually cannot hear. And at that point in time, I needed to connect with somebody, and therefore I had to think of a different way to interact, to bring that person's attention towards me so that he could open the door in the first place to let me in. Now, funnily enough, as much as we all dislike dealing with problems, there's a part of the brain that really loves problems, because problems are its way of engaging itself, making itself work in order to find a solution, in order to think of something new. And it is that part of my brain that suddenly lit up, wherein I started to dance standing outside of the shop, and I started dancing pretty rigorously. In my own head, thinking that probably if he realized somewhere in his subconscious that something outside of his shop was moving and distracting him, he might just look up, see me, and probably allow me in. And as I was dancing, there were these other people from the surrounding area, from the other shops that had started to gather outside. They were probably wondering as to what this crazy lady is doing outside. Why am I dancing outside this shop rather than just walking in? And at that point in time, to us so-called relatively normal, sensible people, I must have appeared a whole lot crazy. But that bit of craziness caught his attention. He looked up, smacked his head a bit, came out, opened the door, and I was allowed to come inside the shop. As I followed this person inside, he walks onto the other side of the table and starts doing his stuff which he was doing earlier. And again I revert to my subconscious, to my unconscious, and I try to speak to him, and of course he can't hear, which is where I suddenly again realize I need to engage in a different kind of a language. I need to get a little more aware of the way I engage with this person. I could not take for granted that unlike me, he would be able to make use of some of his senses, and therefore I had to engage with him in a more sensible, in a more aware way. So I shook the table a bit harder to be able to get his attention. He looked at me, we communicated using our hands, and I my mouth, and he probably able to grasp something from there, and we were able to establish a communication which I very rarely engage in. But somewhere that conversation gave me an insight into something which probably I was not aware of at that point in time, even when I had engaged with him in that interaction. In hindsight, upon reflection, I realized that so many times, almost all the time, we take our senses for granted. While there are people who use their other senses more effectively because they cannot take their regular senses for granted. Personally, I also got an insight that probably, like most of us whose all the senses are working, have the capacity to even say that we are quite senseless, somewhere being very indicative that probably most of the times our senses are working less most of the times, and that is why we are kind of insensitive to our senses as well. On the other hand, in this person's dictionary, senseless may not be the word that exists at all. Because since he cannot take his senses, or at least all of his senses, for granted, he has to be more sensible and more sensitive in the way he uses his given senses. We whose senses are working almost all the time barely recognize what our senses do for us. Nonsense. While on the other hand, these words may just not exist in somebody else's dictionary. And I also realized that probably as much as a handicap it may be for those people, it's nature's way of filtering out all of the nonsense that we engage in. And probably since they just filter out all of the insensitiveness, all of the nonsense, all of the senselessness, all of the meaninglessness, they probably are more sensible because they are more sensitively attuned to their senses, because they are more sensibly tuned in to their senses, and therefore they just might make more sense than what we refer to as the normal people. Let's try and tune into our senses. Let's try and tune into our sensibilities. Let's try and engage in our sensitivity a little more so that we reduce the meaninglessness, the nonsense from our life. Let's try and become a little more aware about our subconscious in a more conscious manner. Let's try and think about that a little more, and I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the contents of my videos, please do like, share and subscribe.